Good evening and welcome to the Get Football Mercato show, here every weekday to bring you the latest transfer news from across France, Germany and Italy. I'm your host Nathan Staples, and joining me this evening are Alessandro Pugliese from Get Italian Football News, Andrew Thompson from Get German Football News and Jeremy Smith from Get French Football News. We start tonight in France, where one of the more interesting moves of the day happened as we saw Joao Moutinho head to newly promoted Wolves in the Premier League. Jeremy, what can you tell us about that deal and what he may bring to the Premier League?
This feels like the latest episode in the Jorge Mendes versus Mino Raiola fight to take over the whole world. Certainly Mendes has been very linked with Monaco, with Wolves more recently, and generally with a lot of Portuguese players. Moutinho is well known, very established Portuguese player, international, and has been a really good servant for Monaco the last few years. But excellent midfielder. He can sit, he can attack. I wouldn't quite say he's box to box, all energy, but an excellent passer of the ball, very good at set pieces, and has been a sort of crucial part of the Monaco team the last few years. But last year, I thought he was for the first time really looking a bit off the pace, and it's kind of weird. He's sort of had a good and a bad influence in the changing room. Good in that because of his experience, he's been helping some of the young players along, but also bad in that I think at times this season there was a bit of tension with a few people wondering if he's only still getting in the team because of the Mendes connection. So I think it's probably a good time for him to move on. To be honest, I'm a little bit surprised he's moving to the Premier League because you sort of think of it as higher paced than Liga, and so you wonder if he was already looking at starting. I mean, he's not that old; he's 31, but he was sort of starting to show his age last year. I wonder if he'll be showing up a little bit more in the Premier League. But at the same time, really good, experienced head, clever footballer. So again, even if he's not playing week in, week out, he could be a good influence, sort of helping some of Wolves' younger, less experienced players through. But yeah, it was certainly a bit of a sort of eyebrow raiser.
Yeah, and it's good experience for Ruben Neves to have someone who he must have looked up to as well aside him now. But also, I want just very quickly, Jeremy, wanted to talk about the fee involved. Really, I know he's 31 and he's been a good servant for Monaco, but £5 million, regardless of if he is slowing down, does seem a little bit of a steal.
I've given up with the market. I mean, a couple of years ago, I would say that's a lot of money for a 31-year-old who's not, he's not Cristiano Ronaldo with the best will in the world. But when you look at some of the prices banded around, I'd quite happily have 10 Moutinhos for one Richarlison, for example. So, I think in today's market it might seem still. It feels ridiculous to even be saying that because 5 million still feels like a reasonably big fee, but who knows anymore?
The crazy world of the transfer window, especially with the numbers that keep being thrown at us. On to matters in Italy with you, Sandro, and it's been an interesting day between Milan and Juve, really, as they're all talking all sorts of deals with defenders and a certain Argentinian striker possibly going one way as well. Are we expecting another interesting twist to this Serie A transfer window with potentially a big move for a player going back to Turin?
Well, last night after we ended our show, first reports came in of Bonucci possibly rejoining Juventus this summer. And so it's a bit of a complicated situation, but this is where we stand at the moment. Bonucci would like to leave Milan, even though he was named captain last summer. And he's definitely open to returning to the Bianconeri. While Juve would like to insert Higuain into the potential deal. Again, as I've stated, offloading Higuain is almost a priority for Juve at this point. And in which case, Milan then asked Juventus for Mattia Caldara, the young center back. because they want to have a replacement for Bonucci, obviously, before letting their captain go. But Juve are quite hesitant to let go of the young center back who joined from Atalanta this summer. So at the moment, we're at a bit of a standstill with the latest report saying that Milan and Juve are in no real rush and will continue to look to find agreements on the evaluation of Higuain and Caldara at their price ranges. But it's all a pretty crazy situation to think that Bonucci could end up back at Juve after his 7-year stint in the black and white, with potentially Higuain moving to Milan this summer. Certainly did not expect this coming at all in any way.
It's almost like Higuain's joining the regular sort of Italian merry-go-round we sometimes see. But the interesting one, I do want to discuss the potential impact of Bonucci returning to Juventus. I mean, it was only this time last year, really, that the real surprise move of him going to AC Milan, sort of forcing his way out of Juve. It just feels a little bit strange that he's so eagerly crawling back to them, but will he be welcomed with open arms?
That's the big question. I've definitely seen split opinions from Juventini at this point. Some do not want him back one bit, especially after his words when he joined Milan last summer, saying he will change the equilibrium of the league, and then also celebrating after scoring in Torino. Others, on the other hand, would be like willing to forgive and forget, as they say. It's interesting because perhaps Juve look at this as a push to win the Champions League in the next 2 years or so, because maybe they see Bonucci as a great fit in their lineup with Ronaldo up top, Bonucci playing those fantastic long balls. But to think that this was possible at all would be pretty incredible. But here we are, and everything looks in play at the moment. So we'll have to wait and see how reports progress.
You can never really doubt transfer windows, can you? They always try and spring an interesting surprise on you. Time to bring you in on this, Andrew, and reports from Germany that sort of came out just before we went on air from Sky Sports, reporting that Borussia Dortmund winger Andre Schurrle is on his way back to London this summer and is having a medical tomorrow, but with who?
Well, I think the shock is that's going to be with Fulham. It might not surprise Premier League fans considering the business Fulham have done. No one expected Jean-Michel Seri to end up there either, but he did. I think it just shows the pull of the league, and even smaller clubs have the finances. But in regards to Schurrle, he just wasn't going to get the chances this year at Dortmund, especially with the managerial change with Lucien Favre coming in. There's a lot of younger wingers as well that most likely are going to be giving a look in. Jacob Brun Larsen's coming back from his loan from Stuttgart. Marius Wolf came in from Eintracht Frankfurt. So, and there's still likes of Christian Pulisic is still there. Marco Reus is fit. So you have, plenty of options in the squad. And to be honest, Schurrle never really took his chances while he was there, did he? He's not. He just wasn't in the plans, and Dortmund aren't short of attacking options. Jadon Sancho's another player as well on the left too. He's competing with Maximilian Philipp. We don't know if he's going to be used as a central forward or if he's going to be used on the left as well. So, at current, technically there's 5 left-sided attacking players in the Dortmund first-team squad, and 2 of them are younger players who deserve a chance. Now again, there's Royce and then there's Philipp. So since Schurrle didn't take a chance since he's been there, someone had to go. Squad, a retooling is needed at the club at the moment, so it makes sense for him to leave. But it is a little bit surprising that he ended up at Fulham. But with that said, when you look at that Fulham side, they do need some reinforcement if they plan on staying up in the league. So you would assume that if Slavoj Jokanovic keeps his 4-3-3, that you could see Ryan Sessegnon on the left, you could see Schurrle on the right, and maybe Abubakar Kamara at central forward, depending. So he should get a fair bit of time. It's just a question of if he'll settle, how he'll adjust to the league again, considering his time at Chelsea wasn't fantastic. So we'll see what happens with that.
It's an interesting move, really, because obviously English fans would have seen Andre Schurrle before, and he's obviously spent a few years back in Germany, both with Wolfsburg and Dortmund, to varying degrees of success with all 3 of them, really, since he left Leverkusen originally, where he really made his name, other than obviously the spell at Mainz as well. Do you think going to a club with maybe slightly lesser expectations than have been placed on him previously may help him flourish a little bit more, especially as he is creeping up there in age as well?
I think it's very possible. You look at the way he came through. Obviously, Mainz isn't at the level at that Chelsea and Borussia Dortmund are at. Even Leverkusen, by a certain extent. So less pressure can be good on players as well. It's people often forget the mental side of this game and how it does affect players who are human beings as well, despite being professional footballers. So it is very possible. Obviously, the expectations on the club, Fulham as well, are going to be, just survival rather than pushing for something like a championship place, even winning the league like he would have gotten at Dortmund, at Chelsea. So I think that should be one of the main factors people could look in. If he does break through into the first team, and you assume he does get a regular place, how he would respond to that. But just the nature of the Premier League now as well is a little bit different than the Bundesliga. Obviously defenders operate differently. There's a more wide variety of the way teams play as well. So a lot of challenges, but as you say, with few expectations, it could end up being a good move for him.
Yeah, absolutely. And it'll be interesting to see how he does settle back in, because it's not every day you can sign a big name player that's already experienced your league and can speak the language that is foreign, at least anyway, so simply. On to a bit of our focus then, and we'll start in Serie A as we do it. And there's plenty of interesting stories, as always, coming from the continent. And starting with Antonio Conte, and there's still rumours with a board shift in Milan that they may be looking at him, Sandro, to come in as manager as well.
Yes, so today we had Sport Italia and La Repubblica report that Milan have reached out to Antonio Conte regarding the head coach position, but the former Chelsea boss has asked for some time, as he needs to sort out his contractual situation with the Blues. This is no surprise. Conte has been linked with Milan for, I'm pretty sure, 2 years now, since he left the Italian national team. Gattuso had signed a contract extension just 3 or 4 months ago until 2021, I believe. But a lot of changes are happening at Milan now. The sporting director, Massimo Mirabelli, officially left the club today. So the new management is certainly putting their new imprint on the club, and we will see if there are the conditions for Conte to take over at some point. But just premature reports as of yet, nothing too serious.
Yeah, I think you can never really trust contract extensions in Italian football just yet, at least for managers, at least. On to some successful news for Rome, at least. We'll come on to the issues that really have occurred from earlier this evening, or earlier today as we spoke. But one move that they did get through the line, and again with very creative Twitter announcement for it as well, and is Robin Olsen as their replacement for Alisson Becker. Obviously joined Liverpool this summer. What do you think to the move, and what can you tell us about it, Sandro?
So after selling Alisson for a record fee to Liverpool, Roma are obviously on the market for starting goalkeeper. Personally, maybe would have preferred to see a little more ambitious move, but Olsen is certainly capable of getting the job done. I just don't see him as a game changer in the way Alisson was for them the past season. But in the deal for 11.5 million for a very solid starting goalkeeper, who played very well at the World Cup, definitely pretty solid business, as is expected by Roma at this point under Monkey. So they have their starting goalkeeper all set, and they will be looking just for a winger to fill after they lost out on Malcolm.
Yeah, and we'll obviously come into him in a moment. But I just wanted to get your opinion on this, really, Sandro, that obviously the Alisson saga sort of went on for considerable time. There was a lot of talks of clubs looking at him just before the World Cup, and obviously the deal didn't get signed until after the tournament was over. And a lot of other goalkeepers had sort of left their mitts. They were linked to a fair few. I remember Alban Lafont being a name that they've looked at, that Fiorentina obviously ended up picking up. There's a few different Italian goalkeepers like Matteo Perani, others that moved around very early on in the window. Will they be a little bit frustrated that they've almost had I feel sorry for saying this for the Swedish international goalkeeper as well, but for settling on Olsen?
Perhaps. I mean, you see, I'm pretty sure Perrine joined Juve for something like 12 or 13 million, which is pretty much the same price. Also, they were linked to Alphonse Areola of PSG. So I think Roma had the opportunity of getting just a caliber goalkeeper, just a little notch higher than Olsen. But all things considered, pretty solid business. And if you're a Giallorossi fan, can't complain too much with how the summer's going so far, despite all the drama in the last 24 hours.
So let's get to that drama as well, because we will bring Jez in on this one in a moment, because obviously Malcolm was a Bordeaux player. He's now a Barcelona player, and how 24 hours in football can completely change your life. He was on a plane with his mother even already in Italy as well, waiting for him, as he ended up not getting that flight and ended up staying. Now he's headed to Barcelona, and Monkey has discussed potentially legal action in this one. I don't know exactly what he's looking at, Sandro, but can you tell us a little bit more of how the sort of day has unfolded from a Roma perspective?
Yeah, so early this morning, it was still up in the air as to where Malcolm would end up. A couple hours ago, Barca officially announced the deal. So at this point, Roma is certainly not too happy. What happened was, after finding the agreement with Bordeaux, Malcolm, and his agent, the Bordeaux president insisted on tweeting out that an agreement had been reached between the parties, while AS Roma was hesitant and did not want to do so because they're listed on the stock exchange in Italy and have to play by certain rules. Bordeaux's president insisted, and that happened. And then we saw, hours after that, those tweets went out, that Barcelona were looking to hijack the deal, and Bordeaux claimed that nothing was ever signed, nothing was in writing. And now Monkey has said that they are considering legal action. I don't know exactly what form that would take yet, but definitely a hectic last 24 hours for the Giallorossi.
Yeah, I can't imagine what legal action you could take other than maybe it being a little bit of a PR disaster, I suppose, with everyone mentioning a deal with Roma happening on different websites before obviously it not actually going through. But I'll bring you in on this, Jez, because what this did spark was what Bordeaux hoped to spark was maybe a little bit of a bidding war. It didn't end up like that. Barcelona got the man for, looks like, around about 41 million euros, which is plenty of dollar for Bordeaux, which they'll be pretty happy they've got over the line. But is Barcelona the right destination for Malcolm?
I think it's a case of wait and see. It depends which Malcolm they get. He started last season, first 10 games or so, he was unplayable, and then he pretty much, he made it clear that he wanted to leave, and he pretty much vanished for most of the rest of the season. And by an amazing coincidence, just the last 3 weeks of the season, as the transfer window is thinking of opening again, suddenly he starts playing well again. So there's no dispute that he's a huge talent and there's great potential there, but he hasn't yet shown that he can sort of show it week in, week out. And there's also a little bit of potential for maybe troublemaking there. So maybe Barcelona is a good place for him because they're sort of past masters at getting the best out of young players. But first of all, I'm not sure that he entirely fits the Barca model. And also, from a French point of view, he very much, although he's left-footed, he very much plays on the right wing. So it makes you wonder that there's not really going to be room for him and Dembele in the team. It's a strange choice for me. He's been linked with so many teams in Europe, but not any at the very, very top. I would say not with all due respect to Arsenal and Spurs and Inter and teams like that. For me, Barca are sort of another level above, and I'm surprised that they've gone in for him. Bordeaux should be laughing. I think 40 million is a really good price, especially because they're sort of in a bit of money trouble and needed money quick. So I think it's a really good deal for them. I'm surprise Barca are in for him, and we'll just have to wait and see. But I'm not 100% convinced about him yet.
And it's an interesting one, isn't it? It seems like the bigger clubs are looking at bringing these young players in even before they make that mid-step that we sort of saw in the past with maybe teams like Dortmund and Atletico and Monaco. They're just going straight for them now to trying to cut out the middleman, as they may say. On to matters in Liga with you, Jez. And there's plenty of big news. There's a couple of deals that have gone through and obviously an interesting one involving an Italian, which we might bring Sandro in on as well. And we start with Monaco, who obviously sold one player today, but also bought one in Strasbourg, player Jean-Udes Aluhu. It's a decent signing for them. They're always great at picking up these little gems that we've seen in French football before. Obviously, they brought Thomas Lemar for a relatively cheap fee from Caen when no one had really heard of him. They've done this several times before. Is this maybe another gem for them?
It could be. I mean, they've been sort of stockpiling really young talent from all over Europe this summer, but they don't seem to have brought in that many players with, I was going to say, top level experience. I mean, you could even argue just sort of general professional experience. A lot of them are really, really young. So Hulu is an interesting signing because he's only just completed his first season of Liga. He's kind of had quite a quick ascendancy from Nacional, which is the third level in France, to Ligue 2 to Ligue 1. But in Strasbourg's first season last year, he was probably their player of the season. Really strong, good defensive midfielder. He's also popped up with 5 goals, which isn't a bad return for the position he plays in and for a team sort of struggling at the bottom half of the table. So, I mean, again, as I said, Moutinho's left now, and really the most experienced players, arguably, in Monaco's midfield are Youssef Benacer, who's going to start the season injured and hasn't even played for Monaco yet. He keeps going out on loan, and Yuri Tillemans, who's, I think everyone agrees, is an excellent young prospect, but didn't have the best first season at Monaco last year. So it sounds strange to say of someone with only 1 year's top flight experience, but Ahulu actually is going to come in as one of the more experienced players, and possibly with his kind of not street cred, but he's been around the block a little bit, if not in the top flight. So possibly he'll be there to kind of teach the youngsters a thing or two, get them a bit battle hardened, and we'll probably get a decent amount of playing time as well, particularly with obviously the European campaign as well as Liga.
Very interesting move indeed, and another interesting move that's maybe seems to be on and off all summer, really, to be fair, and that's involving the mercurial Mario Balotelli, who had a great season really with Nice, and it seemed like for the longest time before the World Cup started that it looked like all roads were leading to Marseille. At the moment, it now seems like that deal might be off. What do you think to that, Jez? Was he maybe the piece that a Marseille side needed to bring? Because we've mentioned previously they need a striker, and it seemed like for the longest time that Balotelli might be the ideal option.
I mean, Balotelli to Marseille seems like a marriage made in, I don't know if it's heaven or hell, but they kind of seem made for each other. Absolutely brilliant club, brilliant player, but also slightly unhinged club and player. So it could have been stunning or stunningly bad. So I think even as neutrals, it's a pity if it doesn't happen. Certainly the Marseille fans absolutely want him to come, and by all accounts, he wants to come. So I'm not sure what the hold-up is. I've been reading quite a few people suggesting, just to mention him again, that it's possibly Raiola holding out for a bigger deal in an Italian club. I wouldn't be surprised if the deal still happens, but they're running out of time, and the longer it goes on, seeing as this was one that was, it was already being talked about before last season finished. So it's been going on so long, I suppose you have to start wondering, if it hasn't happened already, it's not going to happen. But I do think they would work out well together. The one thing that Marseille really were missing last year was a reliable striker. So, I think they probably should be going all out to bring him in.
And to get an Italian view really on this one, Sandro, because obviously he's also linked with a few Serie A clubs, including Parma being mentioned in recent reports, at least anyway. But there was also Napoli earlier in the summer before Carlo Ancelotti was announced as well. Would he be? Are they still Italian eyes looking at bringing Mario Balotelli back home?
I haven't seen too much as of recent, and quite honestly, I'm not exactly sure where he would fit in at the moment. Parma seems like a stretch, just due to his wages. I can't imagine they could afford his salary, although it would be a nice fit for sentimental purposes, a team that has just won back-to-back promotions. Like at the big clubs, for the time being, it's tough to really picture him anywhere. I know Milan are looking for a striker, but a third time around with the Rossoneri seems far-fetched at the time being. Maybe perhaps Lazio if Immobile was to move. That's just me pondering. But it seems that Balotelli has ruptured his relationship with Vieira and Nice, so I'm not sure if he's going to be staying there. It seems likely he'll be on the move, but the question is, where will he be headed?
Yeah, I still feel like the Velodrome was possibly clawing him by the end of the transfer window, but we shall see. On to a few more completed moves in Liga, so just some little small ones to end with. And we'll start with Yacine Bamou, who has joined Caen. Jez, that's the former PSG shop worker, essentially, going on the move for about €2 million. Caen have been looking for a striker, especially with Santini going as well. They have brought in Enzo Crivelli as well. Does he add to the? I always don't want to say it horribly, but it's almost like a stereotypical Caen striker, isn't it?
It really is. I mean, it's sort of, not anything special, but not too bad. Relatively reliable, but he's not going to win you places in Europe with his goal scoring feats or anything like that. Yeah, exactly as you said, he sort of just follows in the tradition of, Delors a little bit better than that probably, but certainly Crivelli, Santini. Yeah, I mean, it will be an interesting season for Caen because Patrice Garand quit at the end of the season, so it's a new coach, first time in a while. No one really knows what to expect there, so it's a brave move on his part, not seen as a bigger club, so yeah, it's interesting that he's chosen to leave there for what on paper looks a slightly riskier move. But he's, as you said, it would be nice for him if people didn't immediately associate him just with the fact that he used to sell PSG shirts in the club shop. So this is a good opportunity for him to make a mark somewhere else and give us something else to talk about.
And let's hope so, because it seems like Caen is still playing the game of searching tall, big striker and then putting it into the engine to see what seems to pop out at least. Anyway, on to another final move. At least it's a loan deal, really, initially at least, but has got an obligation to buy for €10 million, and that's Gregor Koviak heading to Russian champions Lokomotiv Moscow. It gets another player off the books for the time being, at least, Jezen, and if it's with the Mbappe stuff, the loan permanent deal should count towards this season's financial fair play as well. So that's the important thing in this deal for PSG, really, rather than the Polish man moving on.
Yeah, I mean, he's never really going to get back in the PSG team. The last 2-3 years have been a little bit injury hit, but he hasn't really hit the heights. West Brom fans, I think, were extremely excited when they brought him in at the start of last season, and it never really came to anything. So, yeah, it's just a case of, any more money that they can bring in to try to keep the FFP Wolves away from the door is going to help. I wish him well because he was brilliant for Reims. He was good for Sevilla. He was, on his day, really, really classy midfielder. And I'm not really sure what's gone wrong the last couple of years, but it would be nice for him to sort of kind of see out the rest of his career, getting back to his best.
Let's move on to German shores as we finish tonight, and bring you back in with this, Andrew, because we discussed with Axel last night about Boateng possibly joining Manchester United. The barometers have changed slightly this evening, and as they always seem to do in the transfer window, and it looks like Paris Saint-Germain might be the front runners. Now, what can you tell us about it?
Well, I mean, the reports come from Sky Germany, and also apparently Thomas Tuchel met Boateng about a month ago to discuss the possibility of a transfer. I mean, for me, I think it's questionable on both ends, honestly. I think if you watched any of the World Cup or Bayern last season, it's clear that Boateng has regressed quite a bit. It's also indicative of the fact that Declan Sula made the most appearances for a center back at Bayern last season in all competitions. So it just appears that at least club level, he wasn't relied on the most as you would expect, considering a player of his ability and experience. And to be fair, he wasn't very good in the World Cup, was he? But no German player was. But I think the question on the Bayern end is how they're going to handle that moving forward. If Boateng does leave, that leaves just Sula, Hummels, and Mario Götze's younger brother Felix as the only center backs to the club in the first team, with just 3. And considering Niko Kovac is a new manager and he has an established history of using 3 at the back, whether he will Bayern is another question or not. But even if he doesn't, 3 center backs in your first team for a side who's expected to challenge for Champions League is questionable at best. Then you wonder how Bayern's going to handle that moving forward, or where they're going to look to in the market. In regards to PSG, I think it's also questionable personally. Again, I think he is regressing, and he has regressed in terms of his playing ability. And obviously, I don't watch, Ligue 1 as much as other leagues, but for me, I feel that PSG is almost set in that area of the park. Someone else can maybe elaborate that a little more. I guess maybe. So, I mean, but again, for me, it's questionable, but we'll have to see how it goes from that.
Yeah, very quickly on this one, Jez. Boateng to PSG, it seems like they might have maybe a little bit more priorities, especially if they're penny pinching as they might be. Spending 50, 60 million euros on Boateng seems a little bit like it might be a bridge too far for the French champions.
I mean, to be fair, it's the kind of move that PSG have been making recently. I don't think it's necessarily a good thing, but Dani Alves, Buffon this year, Boateng, I think if they want to be one of the really big clubs in Europe, they should be bringing in the more of the top young talent rather than formerly top players who are on the way down. So I don't think they should be looking at Boateng, but it wouldn't surprise me if it turns out that they are, based on their recent form in the transfer market.
On to more news in the Bundesliga, and an interesting move for Bayern themselves to purchase. At least it's not been fully confirmed. It might be confirmed sort of tomorrow. Is that Alphonso Davies, the Vancouver Whitecaps youngster, the 17-year-old, looks to be heading to Germany. What do you think to the move, Andrew? They have mentioned previously, Munich, that they're looking to buy younger, as it were, and this is certainly a move in that direction.
It is certainly moving that direction, but maybe I'm just in a critical mood. That's very possible. But again, if it's strictly for the long term, then I think the move makes complete sense. He is only 17, and while he's come through in MLS and done quite well for his age, again, you have to think that he'd have to understand that he's not going to walk into the Bayern team. Arjen Robben is still there. Thomas Müller is still there. Frank Ribery is still there. Serge Gnabry comes back from his loan at Hoffenheim, despite being played as a center forward. Much of his time was played as a left winger. Kingsley Coman is still at the club. James Rodriguez is still there, and he's been known to be versatile and play on the left as well. So, again, with a team who is blessed with attacking options, and given Davies' young age, you have to think that it's for the long term. And let's not forget that Bayern still have Timothy Tillman in the system as well, and he's an excellent up and coming young attacking player as well. So in terms of his development, however, it's tough to get a better place than being in Germany right now for younger players. They have a habit of bringing him through correctly. If he's not going to break into the first team this year, he'll be on loan for a year or two, and he will get time. So I don't think his career will necessarily stagnate. But if I was him from a personal standpoint, I would have maybe made a bigger move than Vancouver, obviously, but maybe not one as so huge as Bayern, because sometimes it just does not work out for young players there. But it certainly won't hurt for him to at least get the experience of being at a major club and seeing if he can take the chance or if not. So.
It's going to be very interesting for the youngster, and we'll keep an eye on him, certainly. On to the final bit of news we have for the Bundesliga, and that is Mattia Caldara, obviously taking headlines as well. He has been linked to Dortmund as well. Obviously was bought by Juventus back in 2017 and on loan at Atalanta for the entirety of last season. Dortmund obviously looking to replace the Socrates leaving and obviously Mark Bartra the year before as well. What do you think to a possible move for that then, Andrew?
I think they should just save the money for maybe retooling another position. At the moment, Manuel Akanji came in January last year, settled well. For me, he was one of the best center backs at the World Cup. So you see what Dortmund have in him. They also purchased Abdou Diallo from Mainz for 28 million euro this summer. Umar Toprak is still at the club. Then Axel Zagadou is still there. So right now they do have 4 center backs who, at minimum 3 of them, are ready for the first team, and arguably Zagadou, who did get quite a few minutes last season, both as a left back and as a center back. So I personally wouldn't put too much into it. Maybe Alessandro can elaborate a little bit further, but for me, I just don't see the point in it. With Socrates going to Arsenal, they've already replaced him in Diallo. So, there wouldn't be any point in spending additional money there. Or they can obviously look elsewhere and maybe another position, maybe looking at bringing a proper center forward, considering obviously Aubameyang left in January. Michy Batshuayi has gone back to Chelsea. His loan has ended, and they only have Alexander Isak as their only true center forward right now. And I don't think they should be looking at using Michael Royce in that position. So I think, for me, I just don't see why it would make any sense personally.
And bringing you in, Sandro, to finish off, Caldara himself obviously was linked with that Milan potential deal as well. Looking at it, surely the Juve want to keep him, should they obviously not get Bonucci. And even if he does come in, he's talented, experienced cover with Serie A quality experience.
Certainly. I mean, between the 2 center back pairings, between Caldara and Rugani, myself and as many Juventini see it, Caldara is at the moment the more experienced center back that has got more playing time with his loan at Atalanta. So it would surprise me if Caldara were to leave this summer, especially before even playing an official game for Juve. On the Dortmund front, 5 days ago, Gianluca Di Marzio did report that Juve rejected the German club's offer of 35 million plus 5 million in bonuses. So personally, I do think Caldara looks set to stay, and he should be given at least 1 season in black and white to see what he's made of.
And let's see what happens there. That's it for this evening. My thanks to Alessandro, Andrew, and Jez for their company this evening, and same to you all at home, of course. Please join us again tomorrow for more from the crazy world of the transfer window.